One.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to Common Mansplaining, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Welcome back. Eddie and Christian here. Perfect. Look at that. Perfect timing. Christian, how's it going?
It's good. My voice is still a little bit down, so bear with me.
Yes, indeed. All right. So today we have a dangerous topic. We're going to talk about it.
My voice is still a little bit down.
Of course, my sound snappy right here. So before we get started, we have a question to pose. This is the question: can two white males talk about Islam as an ideology without being called white supremacists or without being considered, hate speech or any number of like buzzwords that I could add to this? That's the question. I feel like
just dismissed as bigots, right?
Right. And I mean, I think we're gonna take some hard lines today. I mean, Christian and I don't have exactly the same outlook on this, but we do both agree that this needs to be addressed, right? We both agree that we have to be able to talk about some of the hard things without being dismissed immediately out of hand. And so before we start, I want to just preface it by saying that I love all human beings, period, unconditionally as human beings. Now, some get on my nerves more than others, like my ex-wife. She's probably up there, but that doesn't mean that I don't love her, right? That doesn't mean that I don't listen. So as we talk about this, understand this is coming from a place of love, and it is my love for fellow man, which is why I think these hard topics need to be spoken about. So,
I would also like to preface that while we might be talking broadly in groups, we do here at Common Mansplaining believe in every individual, right?
Yes.
Is not defined by their group membership and has a right to individual day in court and have evidence presented against them individually for them to suffer consequences, and they can't be indicted just for association or membership in a larger group.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So like we're going to talk about, today we're talking about Islamophobia, and how it relates to the common man. And we're going to talk about, a lot of the things we're going to say is going to be like shorthand. We're going to say they a lot probably. And I just want to be clear, when we're talking about they, most of the time we're going to be talking about radical Islamic regimes, right? Like we're not talking about the peaceful, loving, which by the way is a very large population, like a very large percentage. I want to very briefly go over the definition of what phobia is, right? Islamophobia would be the irrational fear of the religion Islam, right? Or the ideology that springs from it. I want to say also that, if not many people actually fear the things that we use the word phobia for, right? Like we use the word phobia a lot, like transphobe, homophobe, Islamophobe, phobe. But really, reality is that it's not so much that people fear it, it's that people are upset about their experiences with it, or they maybe fear, like, for example, Islamic terrorism, or they maybe fear, trans terrorism or something like that. But it's not the ideology of being trans, for example, that they're afraid of. They're not afraid of a homosexual. They just maybe don't like their ideology.
Yeah. I'd also like to say, I think just to keep this to an hour, we should talk about Islam, critiques of Islam and Islamophobia in the United States.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this topic will become way too large. And again, our rights as individuals are to evaluate people that we meet individually and love them as individuals, but we are going to talk about some stuff on a broader scale. And one of them is, so let's I want to put a few things into perspective.
Yeah. Get it out.
So after the attacks of September 11th, 2001, which were perpetrated by violent Islamic extremism, right? These were Al-Qaeda. We went to war for this, but there was an immediate reaction from the government at the highest levels to kind of make sure this was not all Muslims, right? This was a radical section that were taking them out. That, especially I grew up in Los Angeles. There's lots of peaceful people who have assimilated into America, who happen to practice Islam as their faith, but are still very dedicated to America, right? Are not violent,
Absolutely.
and they didn't want people to overreact and start violent and attacking these people. But we also can't ignore that there is a violent extremist part of that sect that wants to actively destroy, even at the loss of their own life, anything to destroy America and its allies.
Yep.
So Islamophobia sort of sprung up there, and being too critical of Islam was really taboo.
Yeah.
Right. And our medium, we developed a lot of habits about not critiquing, making sure we were specifying that this was Al Qaeda we were talking about. This
Right.
was the Taliban, right? This wasn't a violent, Islam itself. We can live with Islam. We've lived with Islam for a long time in our country. It's
Right.
Islam. That sort of evolved into a protected class where if you
Yes.
just talked about it at all, or were critical at all, right, after an attack, like, oh my gosh, right, another day ending in Y, like today, we had a
Right.
radical person in Old Dominion University, and Islamic shout Al Akbar and start shooting at students unprovoked.
Yep.
Um, so any criticism was shot down as racist, and they were so Islamists were beyond criticism. That isn't going to work anymore. We can't
Right.
live like that. So this is a bubble that we have to burst. People can't just come yell at us and say you're a white supremacist, you're a straight male. How dare you criticize a group that you're not a part of?
Right.
Right. And we're trying to understand them as individuals, but we're trying also, if we're going to live with these people as fellow citizens, there have to be critiques and there have to be changes.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there are, and I want to be clear about this too. It's like people sometimes have this thing where they group any kind of phobia together, like any kind of ism, right? Like racism, sexism, that kind of thing. They'll try to throw it all in the same pile. There's a huge difference between, for example, not liking somebody because of the color of their skin or something like that, and not liking the ideology that somebody holds, like, or that a group of people hold, right? So, like, for example, if I didn't like somebody because they were white, right? That makes no sense because there's nothing about being white that degrades my humanity or degrades anybody else's humanity. However, if I didn't like somebody because they were a Nazi, there is something about the ideology of Nazism that absolutely degrades humanity, right? And
Yeah, and
likewise,
deserves to be criticized.
yeah, and
Yes.
deserves to be criticized, right? And I don't think anybody would argue about that one, ironically. But likewise, there is something about the radical Islamist, jihadist like type of terroristic mentality, whatever it is that turns them into that fundamentalist type of violent extremist. That ideology needs to be challenged, right? And I'm not saying like Islamic people. I'm saying that ideology needs to be like, we need to challenge it. We need to say this is not okay, and it's fundamentally antisocial too. Like we can't. We'll talk about this more as we go on, but we can't live with that type of violence, that kind of
Yeah.
like just antisocial behavior. So what? And I'm tired.
Mhm.
Honestly, I'm tired of it getting painted. Okay, I'm going to bring up an example. Right. So
Sure.
the Ayatollah passed away not too long ago because
Was killed, but yeah.
right was killed. We killed him. And then the several outlets put out this glowing obituary, making him sound. Well, what did the word? I want to get the word they
He was
used.
like this Santa Claus-like character,
Yeah.
yes.
They said, quote, with his bushy white beard and easy smile, Ayatollah Khamenei cut a more avuncular figure in public. And guys, I have a large vocabulary. I had to look this word up. It means like a friendly uncle. That's what avuncular means. And they weren't this was New York Times, but they weren't the only outlet to use that word. Washington Post did it too. Even Reuters was trying to basically humanize this guy. And guys, look, I'm not saying that you can't try to humanize somebody. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, out of all the people to try to humanize, you choose this guy who's like basically a mass murderer, like just got finished killing
Right.
thousands and thousands and thousands of people of it. Can you imagine if somebody said this about Hitler? Like if I got online and said something like this about Hitler, I was just a friendly uncle. I would immediately get branded like a white supremacist. I'll be like, oh, he must be a Nick Fuentes follower or something like that. I would immediately get dropped, immediately get canceled. And yet we have mainstream media trying to paint a mass murderer. Like it's not even like he did it over the course of his life. Literally just got done
Yeah.
slaying thousands of people. And they're trying to
At
paint
his
him like,
order. Yeah.
and the reason they're doing it, guys, if you're not familiar, it's because of political power, right? The
Yeah.
Muslim base represents a very strong and important, like especially in battleground states, like they represent a very important coalition for the Democrat Party. So they don't want to anger or disrupt that base, and so they're going overboard trying to paint that everything that happens in that extremist group
Yeah.
in a positive light. I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, go ahead. Talk. Tell me
Well,
all
I was
about. I
just
mean,
saying, the political Islam definitely deserves critique and should not be observed. And so Khomeini was, in his capacity as a political leader, is really what needed to be dealt with at this obituary. That's newsworthy. Whether he was nice and gave thoughtful gifts to his nieces and nephews is not newsworthy. Right? So out of his death, what news needs to report is why we know about this guy, why his death matters, and his death matters because of his political position and his
right,
positions.
right,
And they were violent and they were extremists, and they were not just to his people, but to Jews, to the state of Israel, to America, to
yep,
any Westerners. Right? This was a person who had a policy of Islamic supremacy. Now,
yeah,
I want to pull this up. So this is political Islam. Why it clashes is incompatible with that is this idea of Islamic supremacy. So historically, if you're in the World War II, Japan, they when they encountered the West, they realized the West was advanced, and they really tried to Westernize their society, Western style buildings, changed their
right,
government to be much more Western style, right? Did all the stuff, westernized their navies, had their ranks, their uniforms, all looked Western style, right?
yeah,
Everything. But before they went to war, they had a propaganda in this of Japanese supremacy.
yep.
Anyone who wasn't Japanese was subhuman, right? Was not descendant of the emperor, right? Their lives didn't matter,
And the
right?
emperor was
And
a god.
the emperor was God, and this led to this ideology that they preached to their soldiers, especially, allowed them to do these very, very brutal things. We talk about the rape of Nanking, and the death that the Japanese inflicted in mainland China, in Korea, in the Philippines and Indochina and other places of the Far East.
Yeah,
And part of this is they just like, if they're not Japanese, right, their lives don't really matter, right?
right.
They propagandized this. And when they met American soldiers, right, we would surrender. And they're like, well, you surrender, then you're basically, worthless. And so, a surrendered American soldier did not have the type of um,
Yep,
value as we
yep,
would value a surrendered Japanese soldier or surrendered soldier in other parts of the war, right? And it all stemmed from the idea of Japanese supremacy,
yep,
and that for us to live in a world with Japan peacefully, that had to be broken.
yep.
Right, there were very strong critiques, and it came from the emperor. The emperor was a big part of that. When he surrendered, he was very took off his hat. He tried to do all these things to say that he wasn't a god, he was just a man, and that Japan needed to, that they weren't better than anybody else. Right, this
Right.
idea needed to come down before they were going to humbly and safely live with people that were not Japanese. And
Exactly.
so, right, and I felt like the Islamicists that I grew up with, people who practice Islam growing up in Los Angeles, right? These were peaceful people who saw America first, right? Would
Right.
salute America. America was their country that they were
Yep.
loyal to, and didn't see themselves just because they were better and people didn't have, right.
Right.
But starting in the 1960s, 70s,
Yep.
um, radical Islam started to be preached as a result of Israel winning its wars.
Yeah.
Right. These imams thought that Israel was winning its wars because Israel was more devout to their Jewish faith than the surrounding nations were to their Islam faith,
Right.
and that they needed to not have a Islam that could peacefully coexist with the West. They definitely needed an Islam that was supremacist, that anybody who was not Islam was kafir or less than,
Right.
that they're right. And so their lives, and so this allowed them to rationalize and justify all kinds of violence that we don't really understand.
Yep.
And this is part of the mismatch now when we try and understand suicide bombers, people that are willing to give their life to destroy or inflict any type of damage on Israel, the West, here in America. It doesn't make sense to us. And this is
Right.
something that for years and years of brainwashing is an ideology that is taught as now as mainstream Islam in the West.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the same with the Nazis too. I mean, the Nazis, they were supremacists, and that ideology has to basically be, in order for everyone to coexist peacefully, that ideology just has to be stamped out. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that the Islamic people as like a people need to be stamped out. I'm saying that ideology needs to be stamped out. And so anyone that, especially anybody who holds that extremist level, like that radical level of violence in their heart, that is just I mean, can you imagine if, okay, I was running some numbers, right? And if you count like the number of Islamic extremists in the world as a matter of their population, actually like 0.1% or 0.2% of the population is like radical extreme, like fundamentalist Islamist, right? Like just way out there, death to America, death to Israel, like ready to commit violence today. Now, can you imagine if like one out of every 1,000 people in America was ready to murder you? Like, there's no way that the world can live like that. One out of that even two out of 1,000 people. Like, it's way higher in like Iraq and Syria. Like, it's closer to like 5%. That's like literally one out of 20 people. Can you imagine walking down the street and one out of 20 people carry a lethal risk to yourself? How do you, like, you can't live with that. You just can't live with it. And I'm not saying, again, I feel like I have to,
Well, it's stifled. Yeah, people, you'd stay at home all day, or you'd go out armed to the teeth in large groups, right?
right,
Yeah, our way of life and our prosperity comes from our openness, right? And that um, if I harm you, I do violence to you, it doesn't matter if you are a member of a particular group, right? I'm penalized for that. Well,
right,
right? Islam, like doing violence against somebody who's a member of Islam. Oh, very severe penalties. Violence against somebody who's non-Islam, no big deal, or maybe no penalty at all, right? And that type of Sharia law, and that Sharia is supremacist over the Constitution,
yeah,
right? They would want to have that be a higher law, and our U.S. laws be subject to that. Is an
right,
idea we cannot abide, right? If you
right,
want to live peacefully with us, right? You want to abide these religious codes. It has to be within our constitutional framework, right? Even
absolutely.
my faith has to abide by the constitutional framework and keep the laws of the land, right? And so this is the type of thing where um
Well, we're lucky because our
oh,
faith
sorry.
it basically designed the laws of the land, so we kind of have an advantage there, so to an
Well,
extent.
yes, well,
But
I mean, all right, so I'm a Latter-day Saint, and the Latter-day Saints did face a lot of official government persecution and
definitely,
repression, and there were beliefs and parts of the Latter-day Saint practices that were outlawed by the government and remain outlawed today,
right,
right? And we have to abide by those, and there's within that framework to live peacefully, you accept the sovereignty of the country you're in.
Yeah.
So this is where we've come into. We enjoy freedom of speech. So yes, here in America, you can walk around with signs that are critical of the government. And frankly, yeah, a lot of the stuff we're saying today is about how we feel like the government should interact to this Islamic issue and should treat it
Definitely.
seriously, not just be cowed by being called Islamophobic or something like that. That it's a
Right.
real threat to America and our American culture. But you're an American citizen. You can go around and say whatever you want. You can be very critical of the government, say it needs to change, or even say that God is the solution to America's problems, right? But if you are not a citizen yet, we should be very, very skeptical about vetting people, especially for this dangerous um, uh, radical Islam, and if they associate with no terrorist groups. This is why I support the revocation of the Mahmoud Khalil, I think is how you pronounce his name.
Yeah.
He was the Columbia student who was openly supporting organizing for Hamas, advocating death to America, had his green card revoked, and is undergoing the process of being deported. It's like, if you are not a citizen and you want to hate and death to America, feel free to do that in the Islamic world,
Yeah.
right?
Do whatever you
You
want,
know,
as long as you're not in America.
yeah,
And like, not only that, like, right, like this shouldn't even, I don't even feel like this should be controversial.
yeah,
Like a nation, we talked about this the other day. One of the most foundational rights of a political entity, of a body politic, is to designate where that is and who's in it. That's it. Like America, we have borders, we know where America is, and we have citizens, we know who's in America. And that's just one of the most like foundational like rights of a body politic. So if people are over here who actively want to subvert the body politic, we should absolutely have the right to remove that threat from the body politic. And that should be like a non-controversial thing. That should just be like
we do it
obvious.
as
Like,
individuals. I'm saying we can't
yeah,
do it as groups and say like, oh,
right, right.
everybody who goes to this mosque, we're picking up and moving out. But
Yeah, no, no,
based
yeah,
on individual evidence, and we should be, I think one of the consequences that has to come of this is we have to be very, very vigilant on any immigration from these majority Muslim that are declared as Muslim countries. That's their official religion.
yep,
Allowing them to come here and maybe not having a policy of family reunification as it until things change. We'd like to
yes,
see their culture police their own culture. There is a
agreed.
stigma, and I feel like
That's
it's
pretty,
deserved,
yeah,
that bringing a recent immigrant from a radically Islamic country is potentially unsafe at a level that's much higher than from a non-radically Islamic country.
it's
And I feel like
it's
that's common sense consequence until we see some changes culturally, um, and that
yeah.
might take 10, 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, this is where it gets hazy, right? Because people, I mean, people will hear stuff like that. They'll say, like, well, you know, you're saying that this country is more dangerous, and this country is more dangerous, and this country is more dangerous because they're predominantly Islamic. And I'm like, well, listen, this isn't about the people, right? This isn't about the Islamic as a, you know, Islam as a group. This isn't about Islam as a religion. This is about just risk assessment. This is just generic risk assessment. And every nation is going to look at the people that are coming in. And if you have like one group of people from one nation that just happens to be a risk at 10 times the value, the amount of a different nation, right? Like if I'm America and I'm taking people from the UK, it's no big deal. But if I'm American, I'm taking people from Iraq, I need to be vigilant. And I'm not saying that that means you don't do it. I'm saying that means you pay attention, you be extra careful, you vet them, you do the background checks. You definitely don't have this open border policy that the Biden had where you just let everybody in and like, oh well.
Military age males, especially,
Right.
right?
So you just pay attention. That's all. I mean, it's not like, oh, you know, don't bring in Islamic people. It's pay attention because this is a classic, like this is an age-old, like kind of philosophical question is like, do you, you know, if you're walking down the street at night and you see, you know, a bunch of black guys, do you cross the street or something like that? It's a classic question to test whether or not you're racist or whatever. But the truth is, the answer to that question doesn't actually reveal whether or not you're racist. All it reveals is how you assess risk, right? And it could be that racism is one of the factors that you take into account to assess risk. I don't. Christian doesn't. We are not racist, but it's just one of a million factors, right? People, what I want to say something else about this real quick. Like people have a really bad, there's like a bad feeling about the word stereotype. It's got a bad connotation. Anytime you say stereotype, people automatically think negative. They think that you're stereotyping in a way that dehumanizes somebody. But people forget that stereotypes are something that the mind does subconsciously, and we've done it since the day humans existed. And we do it as a defense mechanism. That we do it as a way of easing our life to make our priorities faster, but also to defend ourselves. Like if you go into a jungle and you don't know anything about the jungle, but you see a creature that's 350 pounds and is striped and has large teeth, if you don't stereotype that as a potential risk, you're going to get eaten. And that's just how it is. And that isn't to say that you look at every Islamic person and think, oh my God, I'm afraid. Don't do that. But you should be vigilant. You should be paying attention. You should make sure that there's nothing wrong with it.
So a term that has entered the lexicon recently is called suicidal empathy. Have you heard about this?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So yes, we want to empathize with people and we don't necessarily want to make them rude. So I know President Obama talked about how he had an experience. He was walking on the street and a woman would cross the street and he thought that was because he's black. I walk on the street, another woman sees me, she crosses the street, right? Women are just, if they're walking by themselves, I've been taught to fear men they don't know, right? Doesn't matter their skin color. I'm a large guy, I'm someone they don't know, they're gonna cross the street, right? And so we want to think about, oh, that woman's thoughts. I don't want to make her uncomfortable, but we can't control how her fears and her thoughts, right? All I can control myself. I'm not going to attack that woman or do anything to her, right? That's all I can do. If she is more comfortable putting herself at a distance from me, I can't control that. And suicidal empathy is when people care more about these feelings, right? That they're now willing to, sort of, I'm not going to walk down the street just in case I come across a woman I could make feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Or when I say I'll jump in the middle of the street and get hit by a car so that woman doesn't feel uncomfortable. Look, I'm feeling uncomfortable is not the end of the world, right? And so part of the thing is we definitely want to treat people as individuals, but this suicidal empathy that we're so willing to not hurt people's feelings that we will destroy our culture, our system of safety, our hard-won freedoms, things in our culture that one of the biggest things our culture has had to fight for over hundreds of years is the ability of women to walk by themselves, to go to a market, to come back, not need male escorts. That has brought us so much prosperity.
To not have to wear beekeeper suits.
And there's a huge difference between the first world and the third world.
Yeah.
Right. And they try to demonize that as a negative thing when it is definitely a hallmark or a virtue that we have earned and as a sign of the safety that we value, as a society, the culture of being a gentleman, essentially. And we're not ready to give that up just because we feel it might hurt some people's feelings. Right, that they feel uncomfortable when
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah. So one of the things I want to talk about is that just so people understand that because we've already received our first accusation, which thank you for the inevitable. Again, we're not Islamophobes. Neither of us are. But we're discussing, and the reason we discuss this is because we need to be able to address the ideology that makes up that extremist group. So one of the things I want to talk about Islamic supremacy and Islamic extremism, jihadism, or whatever, you could call it a bunch of different things. But one thing I want to discuss is the difference between a fundamentalist and a non-fundamentalist, right? So, like, I'll use my own religious background to kind of give people an understanding, right? Like, there are, I was raised Catholics, right? And there are Catholics out there that, for example, believe that the world was created in exactly 6 24-hour periods, right? And then on the seventh day, God rested. There are people out there who think that are young Earth creationists, right? That they take everything in the Bible extremely literally. And there's, for the sake of their religion, there's nothing wrong with that. They are allowed to believe whatever they want to believe. The only trouble comes in when you have a religion that expressly orders you to hurt others, right? That's what, like, for example, in the Islamic ideology, there are express orders, express divine mandates that tell them to injure others, that say death to the infidel, right? And it's not, there are non-fundamentalist ways of looking at that, and most of Islam is able to manage it, right? Most of Islam thinks of that as a spiritual sort of death, right? Not a literal sort of death. But there's the group that can't manage that metaphor. They can't manage that symbolism, so they think of that as a very literal thing, and they think, "Oh, that means that God is telling me to kill Israelites, or God is telling me to kill Americans, or whatever," right? And that ideology, it is that ideology that needs to be challenged. That is just way out of pocket. That is crazy. And you can't live together with that.
Yeah, it's incompatible with West. A couple things, right? So Islam by the sword. This is what's happening in Nigeria right now, but it has a long history of holding a sword to their throats and say, "Convert or die," right?
Right.
And right, so rather than allowing people the free idea. So also in the Quran, several places, more than once, it says that to kill somebody that leaves Islam.
Yeah.
Right. This is something, if Islam is going to live peacefully in America, they need to allow anybody who joins Islam to decide, oh, I'd rather go back to what I was doing before or
Yeah.
leave Islam and have no danger, right? People want to come, you come to my church, right? You even join, become a member of the church, but then you decide it's not for you. You can leave in peace, right? Nobody's worried about people coming to kill that person.
Not in
Right, but
pieces.
this is something that has been reinforced over and over again, and especially it had was not prevalent in this country, but these new migrants are bringing this extremist version of Islam, and it's becoming a thing. People are feeling threatened that if they want to join a different religion other than Islam, their life is in danger.
Right.
So some cultural things, some things in there about honor killings, killing a child, a daughter that has had sexual relations outside of marriage. Not going to work here in America. You're going to have to
Right.
stop doing right. Killing people that decide to join a faith different from Islam, right? Female
Not going to work.
genital mutilation, right? We're not going to allow that here. You're going to have to put that aside. Child marriages or forced marriages,
For
right?
turning women into
Are
slaves.
all right. Yeah, slavery, all things that maybe were practiced anciently, and if you want to do that in the third world, but are illegal here, and you must submit to the laws of the land and the Constitution, right? And
Right.
so the people that have lived here for a long time and assimilated would see themselves as Americans.
Right.
None of those things would be deal breakers for them.
Right.
But people who have been radicalized and taught and come here just from the third world and see this as a fight between them and they want to turn America into Islam, right, are going to fight on each of those things. And
Right.
it's not Islamophobic for us to say that those are un-American,
Right.
right? And those things need to be changed if you want to live peacefully in our communities
Right.
and not um, endure heavy stigmas and heavy skepticism from those around you. If you
Right.
embrace
Right.
any of those violent ideologies, we're going to be skeptical and afraid of you.
Yeah, and right, and like you notice, even in the list, the Christians gave, there are some of those things that you could probably practice, like in your own nation. If you go back to Iran and you do those things, it's not really going to affect your relationship with America so long as America, so long as you're friendly with America otherwise, right? Some of those things, some of them don't even work as like, we couldn't even perform trade with you or commerce with you if you're just like waiting to kill us the moment we do so, right? And hopefully, like, and like I said, this is not a large percentage of the pop, like even in the heaviest places where the most extremism exists, you're still talking about like somewhere between 1% and 5%. But still, that is an outrageously large amount of number, a large number percentage if you are trying to like have peaceful relationship with somebody. Like, yeah, like 1 out of 20 is just like that's impossible. Like, can you imagine like trying to trade with somebody, trying to perform just a basic transaction, and you got a 1 in 20 chance of them just opening
Well,
fire?
right. Even that, if they feel like, all right, I cannot cheat another Muslim, but if you're a Muslim, I can cheat you. So regardless of what I agree to, I can
Right.
do whatever I want, and it's not immoral. That is a we can't communicate, we can't have commerce when you're seeing us as less than,
Right.
because this Islamic supremacy. Now, I want to talk very briefly about one of the major barriers, I think, to achieving this, right? To achieving that commerce that we like, the understanding between our cultures, between our religions. And
Yep.
this is the unwillingness of the media or elites to criticize even the very common sense list that I said, the most extreme things,
Thank you.
right? That we need to call out. We need to call out, look, you need to be on board that these things are un-American.
Right.
But right, and the left has seen that the Islam is a political ally. They're more likely to vote for them, and
Yeah.
so they've been unlikely. They've been unlikely to criticize them, but also reflexively like carry water or
Yeah.
defend them. The
Yes.
big example being this week when there were some protesters in New York
Yep.
outside President Mondami's mansion who were protesting against some common sense, dangerous ideologies in Islam and Islam extremism, protesting, for the Iranian people that they could be free from this oppression that had been done
Yep.
in the name of Islam. While these protesters were doing this, a peaceful protest, they'd had a permit for it and everything.
Yep.
Two men came up and threw bombs
Yep.
right there in the street, was on camera, right?
Yep.
There was a guy being interviewed who was trying to oppose it. Guy comes and throws these homemade bombs filled with nails and
Yep.
explosive down. The bombs
Fragment.
did not go off. They
Right.
failed to explode, detonate.
Thank God.
Immediately, the media started covering for these people,
Yep.
right? Saying that they were just some mischievous boys or whatever and trying to divorce them, that they weren't yelling Allah Akbar or other Islamic things. But then they were interviewed after they were arrested. And they said, no, this is absolutely because of Islam. They were
Yep.
hoping this would be a tragedy bigger than Boston. They were
Yep.
hoping to murder people. How dare anyone say anything negative against Islam? And this is also where we have freedom of speech, and you want us to respect your freedom of speech. You cannot throw bombs and try to kill people who say something you don't like. That
Right.
is a non-starter if you're going to be taken as a full member of the United States. Otherwise, we are going to always stigmatize you and fear
Darn right.
you.
And right. And again, it's all about the media is the huge barricade here because the moment after this happened, like the first headline tried to make it seem like nothing happened. They were like suspicious devices were spotted in and I'm like, I saw that headline and it was very quickly retracted, that headline, replaced by
Yeah.
another headline that again had to be retracted. And the second headline was them saying something along the lines of uh what was it, at an anti-Islamic protest, explosives were seen by Mamdani's mansion. And if
Well,
you listen, wait, hold
they
on,
said
I'm
that
going
the
to get the
attacks were
exact
against
wording.
Mondami instead of
Yeah,
against these
right.
people criticizing Islam, right?
Right, right,
They were
right. Like,
not at
yeah, okay. So
Mondami.
yeah, it said, what did it say? Yeah, yeah, right. It's this suspicious vibe. They literally like made it like if you didn't know what was going on and you just read the headline, which by the way, unfortunately, many people just that's all they do is read the headline. The first thing that will come into your head is that these protesters were protesting violently and attacked Mamdani's house. which I don't even want to get into the fact that this communist has a mansion. I'm not even going to start with that. But just the fact that they tried to make it seem like he
City
was
Hall.
the victim. Yeah. Yeah. He was the victim of this whole thing. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. They just, because they can't say it. I don't understand why it's so hard to, like, I would have taken a like relaxed version of, two Islamic, jihadist, whatever. You can say it in a nice way, but like, please just report the fact. This is what's called paltering, right? In the media, this is what it's basically, they're stating truth, facts, like they're stating things that are technically accurate with the knowledge that it will deceive, right? And so this is why you guys have to be, again, hyper vigilant about what you read in any kind of mainstream media, and even independents, right? Come here to Common Mansplaining, and we'll give it to you straight, right? I'm never going to spit garbage at you like that, ever. I swear to God, in my life, I will never say something to you with the intent of deceiving. I have my biases and I state them plainly, but I will never, ever in my life tell you something knowing that you will be tricked by it. Period. And so, like, you got it. First of all, don't just read the headline. Please don't just read the headline. Read the whole thing. Because even if you just read that headline and you went into the thing, you'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, it wasn't them attacking mom, but still, like, don't just read the headline. And even if you go into the thing,
This
make
was an
sure
act
that
of terrorism. Was mom dummy adjacent? Now here's my beef with that. Going beyond that, is the media feels justified in doing that
yeah,
because they feel like if they report the news accurately, we'll be angry at these terrorists for doing that, which is the appropriate response. You've
exactly.
seen this in England so much as they infantilize, they try to water and minimize things because they're worried that people will get outraged and be upset. When outraged and upset is the appropriate feeling, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The media should be outraged and upset. They're the ones that should be expressing, and that's the appropriate place to express it, by the way, is with peaceful protests and with like the media saying, this outrages us. That should be like one of the core, and and you still will find occasionally you'll find outlets that will say it, like it is. Like I'm telling you, like I'm upset that people are throwing bombs. I'm just going to give it to you straight. That bothers me, right? I'm not going to hurt anyone else because of it, but it does bother me that it happened, right? The only
And
time
it taints everybody who practices Islam, who has come here from a third world country, who's associated
exactly,
with these bombers.
exactly,
And you might want to say and put a good light on it. Oh no, 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 no. That's part of it, right? And unfortunately, this is going to reflect on your whole community. And until you police this,
yeah,
right, the opinion of your whole community is going to be a low one.
yeah. And I mean, right? Like, think about it's a truly unfortunate state of condition where I mean, I get that. I mean, I'm trying to think of a good way to say this, but it's like there's risk assessment's going to happen. Humans just can't avoid that, right? There's just going to happen. So if your community, if your culture is one that generically produces greater risk, like please in within your culture try to rein it in, right? Like I spend a lot of time with my children telling them not to do the things that would make antisocial behavior, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with me trying to rein that in within my own culture, right? I'm trying to keep them from being violent. I'm trying to make sure that they go, show love and affection to the whole world. And I feel like the Islamic community should do that, right? They should reach out to anybody who has these violent urges, because I know it's not the bulk of you, right? Reach out to
Well,
anybody who has extremist ideology and say, look, no, that's not what the Quran says. Like, this is what we preach. And this is so bring them back in, like, bring them back into the fold. Sheep that wander away from the pack, that happens everywhere, right? So it's not like Islam is alone in that. But with respect, it happens at a much greater frequency within that culture. So we need to get that back to the point where it's like, where nobody looks at that culture any differently, and that's my goal for everyone, is for everyone to
that
like.
would be the goal. We're far away from it. I'm going to speak. This is a spicy take,
All right.
And it's going to be very critical, but this is my common mansplaining sort of spicy take. So
Go ahead.
Islam has a reputation earned, this earned reputation, that insulting them or in any way criticizing them will get them angry in a disproportionate way, and they will react with violence. Right? We're talking
True.
about the Charlie Hebdo that people will react violently. So what has happened is they've created this culture where people will sort of try to placate them, try to not make them angry, try to not upset them, right? Really, they're treated like a toddler. This is very
Yeah.
much like a child who has tantrums at the light. Now, you as a parent will try to not provoke that child, and you'll be, right, you'll be careful and maybe talk softly around the child to not make them angry. But you don't trust that child. You're not going to give them the keys to your car, right?
Right.
You don't really think of them as evolved or as emotionally intelligent,
Right.
right? And so what's happened is that yes, we're trying not to provoke and anger Islamicists, right? But we're also like we're recognizing that you're too, very a few steps down psychologically and morally, that you're not really at our level and we don't really trust you fully. And if
Right.
you want to really be fully part of Western culture, you need to be able to take criticism. You need to be able to say things that are blasphemous or offensive to you and
Yep.
not react violently. People blaspheme and mock my religion all the
All the
time,
time.
and
Right.
nobody's afraid that we're going to organize and inflict violence upon them,
Right.
right? And not that we're happy with the blasphemy, but that is for the Lord to repay and to remember. It
Vengeance
is
is
for
mine.
us. We are commanded to love all men, right? And that is Western culture. People can say things that are offensive, that does not justify that you can react with violence or anger. And just because we're not trying to provoke you, doesn't mean we esteem you as highly as those that we feel like somebody we can blaspheme and provoke and yell at and know that we're safe to do it.
Right.
Those people, it might not seem it to you, are actually esteemed higher and higher respected.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, I'm in the, in the debate space all the time. And I have friends who are, unfortunately more popular than we are here at Common Mansplaining, but they'll literally won't debate against some Islamic like debaters. They just won't do it because they're afraid that if they do, either that debater will react harshly or literally like that debater's following will get so riled up that literally will
Salman
start
Rushdie
threatening
kind of
them
thing.
or like attacking them or threatening their families or on and on and on and on. I mean, and yeah, so this is where that suicidal empathy plays a role again, because in truth, this is one of the things that suicidal empathy misses out on more than any other situation. They cannot perform what I call tough love, right? Because when a child is throwing that temper tantrum, right, it might be easiest or feel most comfortable to just set that child in front of the TV or give them back their ice
Spoiled
cream
them.
cone or give them back their phone or their tablet or whatever, their device, to placate them, to pacify them. But in reality, the healthiest thing for them is to say no. And if you don't stop whining, I'm going to put you in timeout. And if you don't stop whining again, I'm going to take that phone from you for the rest of the week. It may not feel the most comfortable to do these things, but sometimes you have to give tough love, and that's actually the best thing for them rather than to enable, right? We face the same problem with immigration in America, where we're just letting everybody in, and we felt so bad for everyone because everyone else is in a third world country and like, oh, boo hoo, and they have drugs and stuff like that. So we have to let them in America. No, unfortunately, you have to do things the right way. And if it's just a situation where you want to like try to bring some of the negative facets of your culture into America, no, fix those facets at home, then bring them. Come on over when you are like fully able to engage in social behavior with the rest of America. And that's not me saying that any group of people can't do it. Anybody can do it. Anybody has the capability to live in peace and harmony with us, everyone. I don't have any problem with any race, any creed, any sex, anything. I'd love everybody, and I'd love for everybody to be able to adjust and to get into normal relations with the normal trade, normal peace and societal happiness. This shouldn't be very controversial, but it is somehow, right? Like, I don't know why. I really don't. I honestly.
Well, all right. This is what we have to confront. This is the plain speaking. We've talked about this before. Postmodernism is really a decay that's afflicting Westernism, and postmodernism doesn't want to say any culture or any ideology is better than another one, right? What we can say is capitalism is not perfect, but it's better than anything else. Postmodernism doesn't want to say, they want to say communism is just as good as capitalism. And we want to say, look, Western society and Western culture is not perfect, but it's better and it's more evolved. And if you want to come live and enjoy the fruits and the benefits of the West and the prosperity of the West, you have to level yourself up culturally,
Yes,
to meet that. And part of that is the peaceful respect of others. Now, I don't want to talk about get into like Great Britain or Europe right now. We'll run out of time. But
right.
they have gotten to a point where these clashes, cultural clashes, have come where they're having violent backlashes
Yeah,
or large backlashes. And we'd rather not have to do that. We don't want to fight like a civil war, have violent backlashes here. We want our Muslim population here in America to just realize what we're asking for are not hard asks,
you're
right?
not. Well,
and
not for.
and to realize we're coming at this because we want to live with you. We don't want to send you back. We don't want to deport you, but that we're going to at this point. There's so much. We're sick of the attacks, and we're
Yeah,
not going to be cowed or intimidated by you just calling us an Islamophobe or a bigot, right?
right.
If you continue these terrorist attacks, like happened in New York, like happened in Old Dominion today, we will take more extreme measures, and there will be a backlash, and it will not be, and it's avoidable. It's entirely avoidable
100%.
by your actions.
Yeah, trust me, America knows how to defend itself, right? I'd rather
Mhm.
that not be the case, right? I'd rather it not get violent. And again, we're talking about the extremist group, right? Not just Islam in general, not every single Islamist, right? But specifically the ideology that is antisocial, specifically the ideology that wants to perform violence or that wishes ill on others, right? One of the things that needs to be quote unquote leveled up. Like, one thing that I've noticed, and this again, I'm talking about that ideology, that extremist ideology. There seems to be a generic misunderstanding as to how to apply cause and effect, like stimulus and response, right? Like, one of the things that we've known, for example, we're fighting this war, right? And we're absolutely obliterating Iran. Like, it is not even remotely close. And this new guy gets into power, so to speak. I mean, so they say. I haven't even seen him yet because he was injured. They may just be. It may not even be him. But suppose it's him. Like, hypothetically, let's take them at the word. Let's say that this new Khamenei is in power, and the very first public statement he puts out is, "Oh no, I'm actually going to redouble our efforts in this war. We're going to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to amplify your oil crisis." So he's being belligerent all of a
Yeah,
sudden
provocative. Yeah.
to a nation that has absolutely demolished his nation. Like, he's got 0.0% chance of winning, and yet he is being he's being hostile, knowing it would just result in his end, knowing it will just result in the end of a lot of his citizens, of a lot of his military, a lot. I just cannot follow that logic. That has to be the, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't fight ever. I'm not saying don't resist ever. But now, never mind the fact that Iran is essentially the aggressor in this for 47 years. Never mind that. Even if they weren't, even if it was like only America's fault, you still have to get to a point where if you're getting beaten, you surrender. You have to get to that point.
Yeah,
And if
there has to
you're
be a path to victory. There's path to
right,
endurance, right? But not.
right.
They think the Democrats can bail them out.
Yeah,
Really,
I
that's
don't,
what they're hoping for.
right. This whole thing, like, they just have to get to a point where just generic stimulus and response tracks for them, right? But unfortunately, in this extremist ideology, in just this most radical group, they have this thing going where it's like what happens on Earth doesn't even matter, because if they can get dead, then they'll get their 40 virgins or whatever. And I don't know all the rules because I don't know the religion well, but it's like they've processed life such that the way that they treat other human beings no longer matters. So when normal cause and effect takes place, they just completely wash that over them and then do whatever they want. And that's just outrageous. In order for you to live peacefully with the rest of the world, you have got to secure that. You've got to get to the point where you can just process, if I do X, Y will happen. Y is bad, so I don't do X. You just got to get there. I
There's
don't know how.
going to have to be a really big humbling period, and they're not there yet, right?
Yeah.
Japan got there, Germany got there, and they were able to prosper and rebuild, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately for Iran, there's a large number of people that want that, but this leadership, this radical, minority that controls the country politically. We're talking about political Islam in Iran. Needs to be humbled, and it's going to take longer than 5 weeks for that to happen, unfortunately. Now, Eddie, I want to know when we talked about it, you felt like you differed from me on a lot of things, but people who've been watching this have seen that we've really kind of been in agreement on this. What are some areas where, maybe I'm not seeing it, or something that I need to think of more of, where you have a difference from anything that I've been espousing?
Sure. Yeah. So the one thing that I would, and I would want to stress this to the audience too, is the percentages we're talking about are very, very small, right? People don't realize that. It's one of those things where when we talk about it, and it does need to be talked about, but when you talk about something, you automatically amplify it in people's mind, right? It makes people think that it's a bigger problem than it is. And this is a big problem, but as big as it is, we're still only talking about worldwide, what 0.002% or something of the it's a very, very small amount. So if people were to take this message away and walk down the street, they might very well cross that street if they walked up and saw a bunch of people with their heads wrapped or something like that. That would be an irrational action. Not that they can't do it or that they whatever. They process risk the way they want, but it just doesn't. It wouldn't make sense mathematically, because mathematically the likelihood that they would encounter a radical Islamist in America is vanishingly small, right? That isn't to say they're not here. They are, obviously, right? We've seen a couple of them here and there, but it's just the fact that you would interact with one is just vanishingly small. So don't take this and make you treat anybody else with less dignity or.
Okay. I want to push back just slightly on that. From some people that I've talked to about this, they felt that October 7th changed a lot. That it laid bare a lot of the lies about that violent Islam wasn't as widespread, especially young males.
Right.
The young males especially should be, right, that they would attack people who were just at a music festival, who were not soldiers, and inflict a high level of violence. This changed a lot of people's minds about these sort of myths, and the support for Hamas, a terrorist organization, was at over 80% within Gaza. Yes, there are peaceful people that were living in Gaza, but over 80% of the people in Gaza supported the violence, unprovoked violence and extremism of October 7th. And I feel like that stain cannot be forgotten and needs to live on. And they need to apologize for that and overcome it in our minds before, right? If we see young males who are Islamic now, women dressed in the headscarves and walking around, no fear at all. But if you're in a public space, you're walking around Moore Square, downtown Raleigh, someplace there with your kids, and you see a bunch of military-aged Arabic Islamic males walk onto the square, you're going to be rightfully
you might,
skeptical
but I don't think that.
of the means of their intentions are safe.
Yeah, I don't think that's accurate. So and this is
Okay.
why, right? This is why it's complicated, right? Because when you're talking about Hamas, right, that is where the extremists are located, right? That'd be like you going into a Muslim Brotherhood meeting and being like, okay, now I'm afraid. And like, of course you are, right? You're literally in the lion's den, right? If you go to Iraq and or you like you go to a Houthi meeting or something like that, yes, okay, you are in the group of extremists. But in America, the percentage of that group that's migrated here, very, very small. Very, very small. Now,
I will tell you, this is not. I mean, I was on Moore Square when during after the October 7th, and a big Palestinian protest came. You know,
yeah.
more than 1,000
Okay.
people wearing the keffiyehs
So
and chanting pro-Palestine slogans, and I
here's
was afraid.
here's layers, right? So
Okay.
the part of the problem is this, right? Like there's a group of people that like is radical. They have this extremist philosophy, right? That's the group that I'm most worried about. There's a group like beneath that's like they're not actually like they wouldn't go kill anybody, but they're sympathetic to those who do and like might like for example give them aid or like let them stay in their house or something like that, kind of like adjacent radical adjacent or
Yeah.
something like that.
They
There's a
wouldn't police. They wouldn't tell them that what they're doing is wrong, and they wouldn't police
right,
the activity.
right. Like, there's a group beneath that still like I think carries risk where they're like they wouldn't kill anybody, they wouldn't like be violent, they probably wouldn't help, but when something goes down and there's backlash, they would team up. They would get to the point where they're like, oh, this backlash is against all Islamists. I'm Islamist, so I'm going to fight back against the backlash. And it's not that they're in that radical group or even in the radical sympathizer group, but they're in that like I'm going to protest again.
When their identity. Okay. All right.
So and then there's other layers too. It's like it's actually just a big spectrum. But so the point is though, like the only group you really have to fear is that top group. But I would say probably the top group and the second group are who I would hold accountable, like who I would say, listen, you guys need to police your own. You need to
Need to
apologize
change. Yeah.
to
If you want to
crazy
live in
stuff.
America.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't say like most of the people that live in America are in the second and on group, but there's a couple, like one or two in the top group.
Khalil, yeah. If you want to preach death to America, feel free to get on the airplane and do it in somewhere else.
Yeah, well, yeah, not on the airplane because you'll get tackled. But yeah. But anyway, guys, I mean that's all we have time for today. But yeah, I will say that yeah, I mean my heart and prayers go out to those who were the victims of the Old Dominion shooting and the victims of the synagogue, which like we don't know yet, but I'm just going to go ahead and say was probably ideologically motivated in some form, if not, one thing I thought that was weird was that like some of these groups are like kind of responding to um what's his name? Khamenei's like speech or whatever, and
Yeah.
but then they gave credit to ISIS. So I'm wondering if they're just confused or if they're like they just don't anyway.
Yeah, there is a chance that there'll be that Biden let in so many people unvetted that there could be some cells activated. So I
Yeah,
mean, we have to be hyper vigilant,
we
but
do.
hopefully our Homeland Security can minimize that. We haven't had anything, certainly to the September 11th or the Oklahoma City bombing sort of level of terrorism.
Right.
But God bless our troops, those
Amen.
that put themselves in the harm's way. And I hope that actions taken by our military will humble this political and violent regime, and they will be brought down, and the people can rise up and make Iran a peaceful. And once established, the reputation of when you meet a Persian Iranian, this is going to be a pleasant afternoon
Right.
with that
And
person, right?
that's all we want. All we want is for, like all I want is for any person I meet around the world for me to just always feel safe, for me to always feel like they're able to exist, coexist peacefully. And yeah, like anyway, but that's all we had for you today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on Common Mansplaining.
Keep it coming.
Keep it common.